You've been looking at what officials had been saying recently and prior to this.
That's right. And over the past couple of weeks, stark and frank language increasingly about what's happening in the capital markets and the economy.
Government action in the
It's about as dire as a president can get on the economy.
We're facing a choice between action and the real prospect of economic hardship for millions of Americans.
This from an administration that for months said the economy was vibrant, the financial system strong. The president didn't acknowledge, quote, storm clouds until last December. By then, it was raining.
There's definitely some storm clouds and concerns, but the underpinning is good. And we'll work our way through this period.
Then, with each disastrous job report or capital market crisis, an upbeat assessment. In January.
Our economy's flexible. It is resilient.
In February, the president surprised by spiking gas prices.
What did you say? You're predicting $4 a gallon gas?
Number.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
In March, Bear Stearns was in a death spiral, and the Fed brokered its sale.
We're in challenging times. But another thing is for certain that we've taken strong and decisive action.
Our financial institutions are strong. Our investment banks are strong. Our banks are strong. They're going to be strong for many, many years.
In July, IndyMac Bank failed.
I believe we will come through this challenge stronger than ever before.
The three trying to sell this $700 billion rescue didn't see it coming. The Treasury Secretary told NPR last year of the global economy.
It's as strong as I've seen it any time during my business career.
And again last October.
This is happening against the backdrop of an economy that, which in other respects is very solid. So far, there's very little evidence that it's bleeding over into other areas.
As the subprime crisis devolved early last year, the Fed chief.
We do not expect significant spillovers from the subprime market to the rest of the economy or to the financial system.
And now?
This plan is an emergency plan to put out a fire, to resolve a serious crisis which has real Main Street implications.
Slowly, over the last 10 or 11 months, the administration has been acknowledging the problem, always with the caveat that the underlying system is vibrant and flexible and strong.
We've paid a huge price for George Bush here in the last month. I mean, we've paid a huge price for him for 8 years, but in the last month in particular, we've paid a huge price for having a president who really has behaved like a troll, who comes out of the White House every 4 or 5 days, tells us it's okay, and then disappears into the White House. And the reason we've paid a price is because we haven't had a president who could sit down calmly and clearly and vividly explain to Americans what is the problem we're in and what is the solution. And that's why we had all this crazy, messy politics with the House of Representatives rejecting the bailout one day and then coming back 5 days later, people telling you that it's all about Wall Street, it's not about Main Street. And we've paid a huge price for a president who could not speak the English language.
Some Americans believe that they feel they're carrying the burden because of this economy. The economy they say is suffering because of this.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that? It has nothing to do with the economy, the war? The spending on the war?
I think actually the spending on the war might help with jobs.
Yeah?
Yeah, because we're buying equipment and people are working. I think this economy is down because we built too many houses.
John Strauss will doing that. He says that outsourcing jobs is good for America. How is that, John?
Because that's the dynamism that creates new jobs. We've lost 360 million jobs since 1992. But we've created 380 million jobs during that time. And that extra 20 million jobs comes from the freedom to send those jobs overseas. We save money on those workers. That gives us more to do new things with.
The fear is that the cheaper labor gets abroad versus relatively expensive labor in this country, John, that we're going to see a lot more of this, and it will come back to boomerang. What do you think?
People have always worried about that, but it hasn't happened. The average wage rate has been steadily going up, adjusted for inflation. I mean, free trade is good for jobs, too. And the biggest outsourcers, a Dartmouth study found, were the biggest job creators.
So in manufacturing, the ones who fear that the manufacturing base in this country leaves this country, what do you say?
Bye. I mean, there's nothing wonderful about manufacturing jobs. And I think if you look at what we want for our own kids, that should answer the question. We don't want them working in a factory where the work is underpaid, not underpaid, sorry, where the work is very hard, it may be uncomfortable. We want them taking jobs as engineers, biologists. We think the service jobs are good for our kids. I think it's great if people in other countries want to manufacture things and we can import it and pay for it with our service jobs.
You know, John, those who are against outsourcing say when a country loses its ability to manufacture stuff, to make stuff, whether it's on a factory floor or something close to it, the country loses its dominance. What do you think?
Where's the evidence? We can trade for the goods we need, and I just don't think it's true.
So you don't see, for example, that all of a sudden we're at the mercy for all these things from countries like China or India, and down the road we have problems with China or India that we haven't screwed ourselves?
Well, we have, if that's the only country with whom we trade, but fortunately we have a lot of trading partners and we buy things from a lot of people, and that protects us.
As we enter the final weeks of the Bush administration, we turn to a new report that calculates the economic costs of the past 8 years. Linda Bilmes and Nobel economist Joseph Stiglitz have a piece in the January 2009 edition of Harper's Magazine called The $10 Trillion Hangover, Paying the Price for 8 Years of Bush. They estimate that the cost of undoing the Bush administration's economic choices, from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to the collapse of the financial system, soaring debt, and new commitments to interest payments in Medicare, all add up to over $10 trillion. Linda Bilmes is lecturer in public finance at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and co-author with Joe Stiglitz of the $3 Trillion War. She joins us from Boston. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Professor Bilmes. Okay, explain the $10 trillion hangover.
Hi, Amy. Nice to be on the show again. You know, we were trying to understand the actual economic cost of the Bush administration. I think that when President Bush first was declared the winner in the 2000 election, a lot of us consoled ourselves by feeling that the much vaunted system of checks and balances in this country would essentially protect the country from major changes. But we now know that actually there have been very considerable consequences of the past 8 years, and we really wrote this article to try and look at what the economic consequences were. I think that if you go back to 2001, when the president took office, you can remember there was a surplus, a budget surplus of about $150 billion. And the Congressional Budget Office at the time was projecting that that surplus would continue over the next several years. And since then, things have unraveled in every possible dimension that you can measure, and certainly across every metric that economists measure. The budget deficit has disappeared. Our national debt has gone from about $5.5 trillion to between $10 and $15 trillion, depending on how much of the bailout you count. Inflation is higher, unemployment is higher, 4 million manufacturing jobs have been lost, 5 million people have lost their health insurance. And the more you look into it, the more you see the very severe economic consequences that have been the result of errors and poor judgment during the past 8 years.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.